Hello and welcome to Something About the Beatles, episode 265. Now, at this distance, it's getting harder and harder to find people that were around that actually worked with the Beatles in the studio. There's a lot of names that we know, but there's plenty more people of EMI staff that really didn't become household names, which is not a reflection on their work or their careers. It's just there's certain people, the Emericks, the Ken Scotts, the Chris Thomases, the Alan Parsons, those people who went on to have these careers as producers, or in the case of Alan Parsons, as a recording artist himself. Then there's John Leckie, who has been on the show a few times to this point, one of my favorite guests. He, of course, became a well-accomplished producer in the 80s and 90s, but started out at the tail end of the Beatles' career. In fact, when they had ceased producing as a group and worked on their first 4 solo albums in the year 1970 to varying capacities. And we've had him on to talk about All Things Must Pass and the Plastic Ono Band albums, also to give his take alongside 2 of his colleagues when we did a discussion of Get Back from a British perspective. But we have him back here discussing, again, work in the studio with 2 of his colleagues that he was kind enough to reach out to and bring to the show, Nick Webb and Roger Ferris. Now, if these aren't names familiar to you as Beatle fans, I would suggest you go back to the Mark Lewison Recording Sessions book, where you will find their names. Now, in the case of Nick, he began his career at EMI in January 1968, and you will hear his discussion of what went on that he witnessed, Beatle-related, as well as Roger, who worked side by side with Phil Spector on getting the Let It Be album ready for release from the ashes of the Glyn Johns attempts and taking those tapes and turning them into something. And both guys, if I'm not mistaken, I know Leckie at least, worked with Wings later on. But in any event, their insights into working at EMI and the personas that they worked alongside, as well as the Beatles themselves, are worth checking out. And I'm very grateful for them coming onto the show and sharing them with us. So without wasting any further time, here I give you John, Nick, and Roger. We've talked about it on the show before, but Roger and Nick, did you guys watch the Get Back film?
Oh, yeah.
I saw the first part of it. It was in 2 halves, wasn't it?
3.
3 parts. I've watched just part 1. I haven't watched 2 and 3 yet.
Oh, so you haven't seen The Rooftop yet?
No, not yet.
It was really well done. I have to say, I watched it all, but I found it was quite long, wasn't it? And it was quite tiring because it was a bit like
not long enough
being on sessions. It was just like being back at work. It was weird.
It was. It's like I've been there,
Yeah. And Kevin Harrington, seeing him wandering around the back, and Mal, and especially Kevin, he was a bit of not particularly well known, but he was a good guy. And
Kevin's done a podcast, with Robert.
Has he?
Yeah, like 3 times. Yeah.
Oh, so he's still around. That's good to know.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was it was a great documentary. Just, as I say, a bit tiring, really.
Was there anything that surprised you to see?
I think, the interplay between the guy that was shooting it and the Beatles were normally well in control on sessions and things like that. They knew what they wanted to do most of the time. In this, you could see that, I can't remember his name, sorry, the guy that was in
Michael Lindsay Hogg?
Yeah, was actually was quite instrumental in saying, we do this, we do that, you this, you that. And everybody was like following along, which I thought was quite interesting because obviously that was taking them out of their comfort zone a little bit, this filming thing. So, that to me was quite interesting. Yeah.
And you never got to see the Beatles actually recording together beyond the couple things like You Know My Name. You were aware enough that things were not going well, and that would have been after Get Back, right? Yeah,
I mean, Geoff and I did at one point a week of sessions, and we did a backing track of something. Whether it was the one that was used, I don't know. And John turned up quite late with his black gear on, the big black hat, and went at the back of number 3 and started to play piano on it. But as I say, I don't know if that was the version or one of the. You just record take after take after take, And so I don't know if that was one of the takes that was used for the master or not. But generally, yeah, they tend to work separately a lot of the time. It's not often you get them all together. And it's at those points you could really tell the tension, and you really had to sort of like sit there and, behave and make sure everything was absolutely, right, because tensions were a little bit high. When they were working on their own, I think John certainly backed me up on this. I don't know about you, Roger, but when they were working on their own, they were much easier. They were nice guys to work with, basically. For even being Beatles and big artists, they were much, much easier to work for, much easier guys. There wasn't that tension. Certainly, yeah, things were tight, yeah, in those later days.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Roger, what did you think of what you saw in Get Back?
I thought it was excellent. Although I think, if I can't remember when I saw even that. I watched it when it came out. How long ago was that, guys, roughly?
November 2021?
21, yeah. And it was, and I just haven't got round to watching the other two sections of it. Mm-hmm. But going back to what Nick was saying about, if you don't mind me detracting just for a minute, about the Beatles being nice guys and less tension when they were on their own. When we were doing the Let It Be thing, the only guy that I actually met of them was George Harrison, and he was with Pattie Boyd at that time, I think. Was there a little I can't remember this, Nick and John, like a little room, like a little social room, near room 4, that people used to go into, like a little
green room, the green room down the corridor.
The green room was the other side of the stairs.
Yeah, it was down the corridor towards the front on the left-hand side as you're going out.
Yes, and that's where people would sit and sort of wait and to be called and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's. I'm sure it was that room he was in, but he was nice. He acknowledged everybody that came into the room, Robert. As I say, he had no reason not to, really. You just walk in, say hi, and he goes hi. But that was quite a memorable occasion for me, meeting a Beatle,
Mm-hmm. I'd wondered about that just because them being the biggest stars in the world, and whether you were into them or Zappa and Beefheart, I wondered what it would be like, that first contact with something so legendary standing before you.
Well, prior to that, I did knock on Mick Jagger's door once and get his autograph because he lived up the
road. You still got it?
No, I sold it to the girls at school.
For a kiss.
But 2 quick things with the Rolling Stones. They lived at 10 Holly Hill, which was at Hampstead. And I used to wait for them to put a note out for the milkman, and it would say 2 pints a day, thanks, Mick. and when the milkman, before he got there and they put the note out, I used to whip up the stairs and nick the note and take it to school and sell it. Honest to God. And then they go, how do we know it's Jagger? How do we know? I said, look, it is, and I was just trying to do it. But when I went there for the first time, I remember Keith Richards stumbled it along as well. So I had a few drinks and he's smoking a cigarette. And at the time I was a smoker. And I said, oh, can I have a drag of your cigarette? And he gave it to me like that. I said, yeah. And he said, no, you can finish it. I should have kept that, shouldn't I?
That's like Nina Simone's chewing gum and the guy in Nick Cave. Do you know that one? The guy who's in Nick Cave's band. He went to some Nina Simone concert and she took it, before she started singing, she took her chewing gum out and left it on the piano. And he took it and put it in his pocket. And for years he had Nina Simone's chewing gum. And he's just written his memoirs, and the book's called Nina Simone's Chewing Gum.
Wow.
Well, some people do.
I went to see Yoko Ono at a place in Chicago. It was a smallish club called Park West. And by the end of the show, I managed to get all the way up to the front of the stage, like arm's length. And the show ended, and Sean was in her band. This was in the 90s. And I noticed she had maybe a third of her bottle of water left. And I was this close to reaching and grabbing it, and a girl to my right, half a second quicker than me, snatched it.
Oh, no,
thinking, man,
really?
so close. It would have been like my Wings invite.
I got to tell you, actually, the first time I went to Abbey Road, I knew, because I lived locally, I knew it was the studios, it was EMI, it wasn't called Abbey Road, it was the studios. And then when they did the All You Need Is Love television broadcast, my mate, he was a bit older than me, used to borrow his dad's car, and we used to drive around. We used to go to Studio 51 and Klux Clique and all these clubs around Hampstead and stuff. And he said, "Oh, come on, we'll go up to the studios because the Beatles are there and they're below. We can pick up girls. There's always loads of girls outside." And so we drove up there, and of course there was loads of girls outside. And after they'd been on the show, after we watched it on television, All We Need Is Love, and we drove up there, and I knew Geoff Jarrett because I was at school. Geoff's 2 years older than me, and I knew he worked there. And we were hanging around where there must have been 50, maybe 100 people outside. And I saw Geoff Jarrett coming down the steps, and I waved. I said, "Oh, Geoff." And he came up to me. He says, "Don't wait here. Go round the back, the garage, round the corner. They're going to come out there." So me and my mate ran round there. And as we ran out, a big limo drew up, and the Beatles, the four of them, got in the car and drove off. So we went back to check out the girls, and I see what the rest of the girls were doing. And we said, "So where are you going now? Do you want to lift home kind of thing like you do?" And they said, "Oh, no, we're going around Paul's house now to Cavendish Avenue, number 7. Okay, all right. So we drove round there, and there was about 5, 6, 10 girls outside, me and Bob and my mate. So we hang around still chatting up these girls and things, and the door opens and there's Paul. And Paul's like signing some autographs, and he's a bit drunk and stuff. And he's got a glass in his hand, and my mate Bob goes up to him and goes, "Hello, Paul, what's that you're drinking?" And he says, rum and black, he says, rum and black currant. And my mate Bob says, "Well, give us a drop then." We all passed around Paul's drink and gave him back the empty glass. That's true.
Wow.
What a shyster. Oh, dear.
There you go. That's the story. It's true.
What I wanted to start out by asking you guys is, how did your contact with Beatle World begin? Not professionally, but just as young kids when Love Me Do broke and the mania from there. Were you guys into the Beatles, or what was it like to experience that?
Well, okay. Somebody said, "Yeah, I've got to be honest, Love Me Do really didn't do anything for me. I thought it was quite a dreary song. And everybody was sort of saying the Beatles are going to be big, Beatles are going to be big. And the single came out, and I thought it was a bit dreary. And it wasn't till the follow-up I thought, yeah, they're great, and then you buy into it. So I was a big fan. Yeah, I was a big fan.
So you did become a big fan?
Oh, yeah.
Did you get to see them live at any point?
No.
Did you learn to play the songs?
Did I? Well, I was in a band. When I was 12 till 16. So, yeah, we covered Beatles songs and Stone songs and Kinks songs. So, yeah, music of the day and all those Beatles singles, yeah.
Hard Day's Night called.
I'm still arguing about that.
Roger, how about you?
Similar to Nick, really. I thought Love Me Do wasn't I thought they would have had more impact of a first single or for a first single, but it got into I don't know what number it got to. I don't know if any of you guys did, but it certainly got into the charts. And then after She Loves You came out and all those biggies, Paperback Writer, that's when I sort of took notice of them personally.
So you haven't seen them live either?
No, not playing live, no.
What were your tastes as far as the pop records of the day? What were you guys into?
Stones.
Yeah, Stones.
Stones and Yardbirds, yeah.
Yeah.
Some more blues-based stuff? Yeah,
exactly. For me, it was Stones and the Kinks and the Yardbirds. And there was a band called the Downliners. I don't know if anyone remembers it.
I used to go and see them Sunday afternoon at Studio 51. Downliners
Really?
Sect, yeah. They did Little Egypt, Baby What's Wrong. They did Jimmy Reed songs, didn't they? They were signed to Columbia. I don't know where they did the records. They were on EMI, the Downliners Sect.
Really?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Funny, I went to a funeral recently and met a guy that actually plays in them now and again because they're still going. But it wasn't his funeral, but you know what I mean. It's one of the
Don Crane.
While I'm talking funerals, I don't know if you checked it out, but through Brian Bennett, it came out that Mo Foster's just passed away.
I heard that yesterday.
I know this is taking us off what we should be talking about. But
Mo Foster's from that period. I didn't know him, but he wrote that book, Is 15 Watts Enough? Is that it?
Yeah.
Do you know Mo Foster, Robert?
I don't, no. Was he a musician?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a session musician, bass player. I don't know much about him, except he wrote this book all about early guitars, like pre-Shadows or the Shadows, pre-Beatles. And it was called Is 15 Watts Enough? Because it was this small amplifier at the time. And it was all, I don't know, Burns guitars before anyone could get Fender or Gibson in the UK.
Arbiter guitars as well. He had an Arbiter bass. There was a program with him on television, plugging it into a radiogram, and it sounded fantastic. It really did. Really vintage, you know.
So you recommend the book, John?
I do actually, yeah, for British British guitar, British bands before the Beatles, really. I mean, they were still going. Well, it was the Shadows, really, wasn't it? I suppose.
The Beatles had some pretty trashy old gear to start off with, didn't they?
Yeah, before they got Vox and Rickenbacker.
All pretty well sort of strung together with old amps and stuff like that. It wasn't anything like it became later.
It's funny you mentioned that because I don't know how aware you guys were of the Big Three in Liverpool, that band.
Yeah. Some other guy was their song. Yeah, they played,
And they recorded at the Cavern. So one of the guys in that band was the one who built what they call them coffin cabinets that they were using. And that was what the Beatles had. But they were so battered, both when they went to Decca to try out and then at EMI the first time. The engineering staff says, we can't use this stuff. It's way too noisy and trashy. It just was not suitable for recording at all.
Ken Townsend, who was then classed as an engineer, but he was actually a technical engineer, he's the guy that fixed Paul's amp for their early sessions because it sounded awful and sounded dreadful. And he's the guy that actually made the session work for their initial audio test, I think it was, sort of artist test. So we have to give Ken Townsend a shout there for starting off his association with the Beatles.
Yeah. There's two other EMI people that I was thinking. One is Jeff Jarrett. I don't know if you know Jeff Jarrett. He did Beatles sessions. The other is John Kurlander, of course. John Kurlander did lots of Beatles sessions.
He was the one responsible. I don't know if you guys know this, when they removed Her Majesty from the medley on side 2 of Abbey Road because they decided it didn't work. He was the one that stitched it to the end of the master tape just to not throw it away, even though that was what Paul told him to do. And it ended up as the hidden track after all that silence, just because that was very salvaged and they decided they liked it.
The right space. And he also did the cut-off edit at the end of I Want You on Abbey Road. Right? And he says something about, and John, we played it through and John said, stop, cut it there. That's where he cut it.
So do you guys remember when the Beatles stopped touring and Pepper comes out, Strawberry Fields, all that advance, really beginning with Revolver, and some would say Rubber Soul. Did that impress you guys at all, just recognizing in real time how rock was evolving?
No. Not so much from the Beatles. It was other bands, really. I mean, it was evolved so much, Pink Floyd, The Doors, all the San Francisco bands like Fever Tree and Love and, all those bands using synthesizers and things, which the Beatles, people, they talk about the Beatles using the Moog and stuff, and you don't really hear it. It's not like bold and up front the way some of the American, what's that called? Lothar and the Hand people did some stuff, You're
an aficionado of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the synthesizer because I know that, Nick, you were around when they were trying it out for the Abbey Road album, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I was in this there. They were in number 3 and there was a room beyond number 3, which also had a glass window into the studio. And that's where the Moog lived.
And the Mellotron as well was in there.
It was sort of a room where a lot of stuff used to get shoved into, or it could be used as an extra bit of separation with the back end of number 3. And that's where the Moog sat for quite a while because people had trouble getting it to work, as it were, 'cause it was quite complicated. Just loads of patch leads and to all the oscillators and stuff. And they would go out and tune, and then they need tuning up again. Oh, it was a nightmare, really.
And it was George's, right?
I think the original person that brought it in wasn't it Mike Hugg? Is it Mike Hugg or Mike Vickers from Manfred Mann?
Yeah, one of my
he's in the pictures, isn't he? Showing everyone, and there's like Geoff Emerick and Tony Clark standing there as well. That's another guy you should maybe talk to if you talk Tony Clark, because he did, he did Wings Wildlife and lots of other stuff.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, he's good, Tony. Yeah. Have you spoken to Ken Scott?
I want to. He wrote the book a few years ago, and I'm very interested in tracking him down. He's a busy guy. Last time I reached out to him, I didn't get a response back, but I'm going to try again because I think he is a great witness to have. Any of you guys worked with Emerick at any point?
Yeah. On lots of different sessions too. It could have been Matt Monroe, with George Martin. Yeah. He did stuff right across the board. Legend of the Glass Mountain by the guy that wrote the Dam Busters theme, Ron
Goodwin.
Yeah. He did all sorts of sessions. He recorded the Mary Hopkin album with Paul, which I tape up on. Geoff was a very accomplished engineer, and he could turn his hand to recording a sitar or a huge, great orchestra that was crammed into the studio. He was a pretty amazing guy.
Did you guys work with Ken Scott too?
Me? I think we all did.
No, I didn't. No.
Oh, I did. On the Abbey Road album.
What about Chris Thomas?
He'd gone to Air by the time I got there, I think.
Yeah, he was at Air. I remember he would come in and hang around with Pink Floyd on Metal. I'd tape up Metal, and he'd be kind of, "Hi guys, do you need a producer?" He was always a bit like that,
There was a period when we were doing the Abbey Road album that George Martin was on holiday, and actually Chris was his understudy, and he was asked to go along to the sessions, and I think Chris felt pretty awkward, because he was such a junior guy. It was very difficult for him. We used to go off we occasionally get a break or something like that. Usually we're working right through. But I do remember on a couple of occasions we'd get a break and we'd go out and have a curry up the road. And he'd tell me that he felt he was in a very difficult situation, having to sort of step into George Martin's shoes when he was such a junior guy. It's very difficult for him. But there again, when he was working at Air, he also got very involved with the Moog. We talked about the Moog, but he was down there for weeks and weeks, learning about it and how to get it to work. So, he was quite an accomplished guy, even early on. Things were beginning to happen for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite the career he had. I've had him on the show, and it's amazing starting out with the Beatles as this kind of junior guy, going on to do Procol Harum and Roxy Music, Sex Pistols, Pretenders, Pete Townsend, and Wings at one point. Just an amazing career. And it's interesting to describe his feeling so insecure starting out with the Beatles.
You're not expecting. Put in a very awkward situation. He was a youngster. He was a youngster like me, really. I don't know how he got the job, but it was a good job to have because it really got him going in the business really well. But a lovely fellow, as you probably found when you interviewed him.
Yeah.
How about Alan Parsons?
We don't talk about Alan.
Right, moving on.
And hilarity ensued.
In fact, Alan and I lived in the same abode at one time in Hampstead in London. He lived above.
Did you live in Fitzjohn's Avenue? Because I went to Alan's apartment there, and there was loads of people sharing it. And Fitzjohn's Avenue,
No, this was off a place called Willoughby Road, and I lived in Carlingford Road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he was upstairs there for a while. But this is when what got me interested in going into Abbey Road, actually, because he said to me, "Where you working?" I was a boom swinger in a TV company. He said, "Oh, would you like sound and all this?" He said, "I work at Abbey Road, And I said, "Oh, that sounds good." He said, "Yeah, we record music." Because I didn't really know what it was going on there. And what was I going to say there? Come in, brain.
Alan Parsons. Let's talk about Alan.
We can get Alan to talk about Alan.
Alan could talk about Alan. Alan was. Yeah. Did Alan start before you, Nick, or something?
No.
About the same time.
He came from Hayes. He was like
That's right.
Came, I think cassette duplication or something like that. Yeah. He was in the library for a while. He used to go up and ask me to get tapes out and stuff like that.
When did you start, Nick? What year? What month?
January 68.
Really?
Yeah.
That was just before Lady Madonna was cut.
Yeah, I suppose it was. Yeah.
I think Alan started in 67, if I recall right, because he's been on the show too.
He probably started EMI at 67, yes, because I say he'd been working at Hayes Factory. He came from there. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't at the studios in 67.
No, you're exactly right. Right. So, Nick, before we leave the subject of synthesizers, were you around when they were laying down the parts that ended up on Abbey Road?
No, not that I can remember, no. I just remember a lot of busying about it and a lot of seemed to be faffing around trying to sort it out. Yeah, it was all a bit of a mystery, shall we say. So, no, sure. I don't remember any parts going down.
Okay.
Fitzjohn Avenue. Was he working at Abbey Road when he was at Fitzjohn's Avenue? Then?
Yeah. We were doing some session and it was like morning and then come back in the evening and Alan said, well, come to my flat. And I think he was sharing. He wasn't with, what was his wife's name? Smokey. He wasn't with her. He was like in a share flat, like shared kitchen and, bedsit kind of thing. Yeah. And Alan did really well. I mean, although he could play any instrument, I think. I mean, he was always on the ball. And of course, he got a great sound as well, somehow, you know. It's funny because although we were all using the same equipment, somehow the engineers got their own sound that kind of almost reflected their personality, Even though the equipment was the same and same microphones and things, you could almost tell a Tony Clark sound or an Alan Parsons sound. Maybe you could tell a John Leckie sound. I don't know. But no, you could. Alan always got this like, fuck, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I think as Beatle fans, you would just assume that George Martin was supervising and maybe the Beatles had a preference for a certain sound. But you're saying that the engineers had a lot more impact on the sound you got on tape.
One of the interesting things is that they'd never touched the mixer. They'd never touched the knobs kind of thing. Like, I mean, I did Wings and Paul would always be there going, make that sound better, a bit more bass, it's too much kind of thing. But he'd never reach over and turn the knobs kind of thing. Whereas now you get artists that got their own studios and they want to do everything. But I can never remember any of those people actually touching the desk. It was like forbidden, they might.
That's right, yeah. It's like you see George Martin interviewed now, and actually he's moving faders around and stuff like that on some clips. But they never did that. That's right, they never ever. They always asked the engineer to do anything like that. They'd come up with the ideas, but they wouldn't touch the gear.
No.
Did any of you guys work with Norman Smith?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I'm
quite friendly with Norman, actually. He's a super guy and quite modest. It was a bit later on before I realised he'd done so much with the Beatles. So, he wasn't the great I am, although he was quite a loud chap, bags of sort of interest and personality. He wasn't actually a big head. He was quite a modest guy, but very talented. And I spent a lot of time with him on the Parachute album, Pretty Things. And I think that's where our relationship sort of cemented, really. Yeah, so Norman Smith, great engineer, great producer.
I did a Pretty Things session with him and Wally Allen, but Norman was mixing and, I was kind of tape op sitting at the back. And I always remember he went up and they start the mix and it was like, okay. And as it started, instead of using the pan pot, he got the two faders and went junk, 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 junk to make it go backwards and forwards. And I was like, why don't you use the pan pot? But no, he was like junk, 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 junk. And he pushed each, left and right, pushing the faders up. And I thought, wow, that's fantastic. It was like abusing it almost.
This probably came from his he came from his flying days when he was in the RAF. Pushing things left and right and swinging about.
Yeah, he seemed very active on the controls, expressive.
He was a drummer too, right?
Yeah, I don't know. He wrote the songs, and Hurricane Smith, Oh Babe, What Can You Say, and all that. And we thought that was really funny. I did anyway, because it was Norman singing. It's like, you call that singing kind of thing.
Yeah, it was great though. He'd always wanted to have a bit of success in his own name, I think. And I knew him quite well at that point. He told me that he was in a really good position. Instead of just being a house producer, he was suddenly an artist. And the clever thing was he hadn't signed a deal on that Hurricane Smith stuff. And because he had the hit with it, EMI suddenly wanted him. So he had them over a bit of a barrel. So I think he did quite well out of those singles. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Because EMI wasn't great on salaries and all the rest of it, as we know with George Martin. They were quite tight.
Yeah.
When you guys started, were you still in the white lab coat days?
No.
Not on sessions, no.
Okay.
I think me and Nick had long hair. We used to hair down, and we're kind of, Nick used to have hair over his shoulder. Nick had the longest hair in the building. But no, we were pretty hippie, I think, at that. Well, I was anyway.
Things had lightened up.
Yeah.
We were the naughty boys.
Yeah.
So how about working with George Martin? Is that anything you guys did at any point? I know, I think John, you started in 70 and may have had some involvement with him with the Sentimental Journey album.
No, that was it was only Sentimental Journey was like my first week. It was kind of sit at the back. I knew who George Martin was. And then there was, I remember doing another session you may not have heard, Flanders and Swan, which was, he produced Flanders and Swan, which is the guy in the wheelchair and the guy playing the piano.
Uh-huh. They did a lot of stage work. It was live stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. But no, we'd say hello, because later on I did work at Air Studios with Bebop Deluxe and different people. I'd use Air Studios, and George was always there. Stopped me in the corridor, and I don't know if he knew my name, but he'd always kind of shake hands or something,
So you guys never really had deep conversations about anything?
No. Not deep conversations with George, no.
There's too much work to do. You never really had deep conversations with anyone, really. It was just the job, you got on with it.
Mm-hmm.
They moved a couple of times, didn't they, John? I think they were in Peter Robinson's originally, wasn't they?
Right on Oxford Circus, or on the top floor of Oxford Circus, where Oxford Street and, I don't know if you know that, Robert, Oxford Street and Regent Street cross, and there's Oxford Circus, and there's a tube station in each corner. And Studio One had windows, and you could look out and you could see the whole length of Oxford Street, almost to Piccadilly. And then at the other way, you looked at Regent Street leading up to the BBC building, and you could see it all from that control room by looking out the window. And I can remember doing a session in there, I don't know when it was or who it was, the 70s. There's probably Bebop Deluxe when I went there, and there was the IRA bombs, there was a big IRA bombing thing going on. And there was a bomb scare at Oxford Circus Station. And you'd look out the window and there was cars, there was people, it was really busy. And we looked out the window and it was empty. Deserted. There was no cars, no people or anything. And we thought the world had come to an end, It was like, fuck, where's all the people? Yeah, we've been in the studio for 12 hours. And it's like suddenly the world was deserted, the whole of Regent Street and Oxford Circus. That was quite unusual.
Scary. Jeez. Roger, you did some work on the Let It Be album, if I'm correct?
Yes, I did. Yes, that is correct.
And that would have been at the side of Phil Spector?
That would have been, yes, it would.
Okay.
Yes, and I say that because he was a bit eccentric sometimes, but he was a decent chap, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
For my part in that, he bought me 200 cigarettes, Benson Hedges. He made sure he bought all the people that worked with him a little gift. And at the time, I did smoke cigarettes, and he bought me 200 cigarettes. But I suppose I don't know. He came into Abbey Road with a bodyguard or minder called George. I don't know if you remember him or Nick remembers him, John or Nick. he was as wide as he was tall, this guy. And he would sort of get very nervous, Peter Bown, about this, who was the engineer, Peter Bown, on that album. And he would say, look, we don't need a bodyguard here. And it was alleged he was armed and all this, and he got very jumpy about it. And then he didn't want him in the control room or room 4. He just didn't want him in there. And he said, if he comes in, I'm going home. So he said, come in, George, Phil said to Georgie. Then Peter Bown went home. So we had Mike Sheedy for 2 nights. And then the entourage went round, because Peter Bown lived near the studio. They went round to coax him out again. Look, we're really sorry, George won't come in again, and all this sort of thing. And they put a chair outside the room door for him, as I said yesterday, John. And he looked like he was doing witness protection.
Gosh, yeah. I remember, John. Do you remember when we first saw Phil Spector? Because I remember you and I being completely shocked because we thought he was going to be a bigger than life big fellow with a cigar and all that. And then came this guy that was no bigger than me, It was quite a shock.
Yeah, and a little squeaky voice,
Yeah, at all.
First time.
So his reputation preceded him?
Totally. It was with Eddie Klein as well, we met. And we met in the corridor, just outside room 4. We got introduced like that. And he said, what's your name? And this guy goes, Eddie Klein, Eddie. And he goes, hang on, I feel a song coming on. He goes, I'm going steady with Eddie.
Right.
It just never switched off, that guy, really.
They loved Eddie Klein, didn't they? They loved Eddie. Took him to Apple and had his picture taken. Yeah. Didn't they jokingly, he said that he signed him to Capitol or something, and he got his picture on the front of Billboard or Cashbox, it's like Apple's new signing, and it was Eddie Klein. It is, you can still see it. They're all sitting around there, and Eddie's in the middle,
Brilliant. That's great stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then he worked for Hog Hill, didn't he, I think?
Yes, he worked for Paul for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, they bought him a house down that way to get him. He had to move out of London, so Paul bought him a house, which was very nice for him. Lovely guy, Eddie. Very sweet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Spector, what was it like working on those Let It Be mixes?
Well, for me personally, the first thing I remember about that is because there were 2 versions of the Let It Be song. There was a single one, wasn't there, I believe?
Yep.
And then there was the album one, the one that Phil Spector did. And the first thing he wanted to do on that particular song was to, the hi-hat on the beginning, he put some tape echo on it, which repeats and like that. But he did change it. He elongated the song as well, I believe.
Yes, he did.
With an edit. But for me, I can hear one clash of harmonic in that single version as opposed to the album version. And the piano sound is warmer on the album version than the single. But there's definitely a harmonic clash somewhere. It's about...
You're talking about the bad note Paul plays toward the end?
It's about 2 minutes 59 seconds in. So I checked it the other day. And I don't know how that got by, if you know what I mean.
That's what people say about Long and Winding Road and the bad bass notes on it.
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, yeah. John playing the bass and why that one wasn't fixed, but his bass playing and Let It Be was.
Okay.
Speaking of lengthening the song, that was also what he did with I Me Mine, right? The George song that was like 1.5 minutes long.
Yes, that's right. And I think is that the one where he put the second verse or something back in later, and it was 3 and 5 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I do remember. Well, I don't remember, but I remember reading about it afterwards.
Okay.
Because I never really heard the final things because it's just. Well, I probably did, but it's just such a long time ago to remember. It's over 50 years ago, isn't it now? Over half a century. Yeah. When you think about that, and we're still talking about it, it must be pretty good.
Yeah.
Across the Universe would have been part of that group of songs you worked on too, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And the other one I quite liked, I'm not sure if there was an edit on that Robert, was I Me Mine. No, one after 909. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, that's intact from the rooftop. They didn't do any editing on that.
Right, okay. Mm-hmm. But isn't that one of the first songs they actually wrote, John and Paul together?
Correct.
And it was one of the last ones they recorded together as well.
That's right, yeah. So in 63, at the From Me to You session, they did a take of it, trying to capture it then. And it's not very good. It's on Anthology 1, if you get a chance to hear it. But that song went back to the Quarrymen days. We've got a recording done at Paul's house on 4th and Road they did with Stuart Sutcliffe in 1960. So it was just one of these things they kept returning to. They didn't really nail it till the end of their career.
Yeah.
What I was wondering about was, I don't know if you would have any insight on this, but why the take they had from early 68, it was recorded around the time of Lady Madonna of Across the Universe. Did they slow it down a half step when Spector got his hands on it?
I can't remember, to be honest with you.
I didn't know if it had something to do with the orchestration, or he just thought the feel was better, slowed down, or just an aesthetic judgment.
That I can't answer. On the day of the orchestration was my day off, so I just done about 7 nights on the trot with them, and I was just like a zombie, at that time. And
did Pete Bown do that, the orchestra, or did Rick Lush do it?
No, Rick Lush took my place as tape-op, and Peter Bown did the recording, I believe.
Yeah. And that's Pete Bown, of course, Robert, is a bit of an unsung hero, really, because,
Hopefully.
He did all the early beat. If it wasn't Norman Smith doing it in the early stuff, it was Pete Bown, really. He did so much. I mean, he was there from the war, and they called him back because there was no one to record operas. So I think he'd retired. And it was like, we got this big opera recording and there's no engineer capable, would have to, and so they called Pete Bown back. Yeah. And it was all 4-track, he'd do like a symphony orchestra stereo, and on tracks 1 and 2, and 3 and 4 was the 100-piece choir with the soloists moving around in the stereo, and that was it.
Wow.
And mix it was just faders up on 0, and that was the mix.
Yeah.
Pete Bown.
Was that recorded at EMI in the number 1 studio?
Yeah. But Pete could sort of handle anything, he's it taught me all I know, really. He'd also go home, he'd like say, oh, there's a film on TV I really want to watch, and leave me to the engineer. You can take over, John, And I kind of, that's how you learn to do things, really, is you're just thrown in at the deep end.
As we said when we spoke to each other last time, Nick and you, John, he was never present for editing, was he?
No. Yeah, if there was
I don't think that was the one thing you could do.
He'd always make sure you did the edit, so if you mess it up, it's your fault, They'd say, like, cut it there to there, and then he'd go off for a cup of tea or something, and you're like, you know what?
Nick, speaking of orchestras, if I'm not mistaken, you were around when George Martin cut the orchestration for the Yellow Submarine film?
I don't think so. I don't recall that.
Before your time. It's before your time, Nick, isn't it?
I think it would be, yeah. I don't recall that.
No, it was October 68.
Well, no, I don't remember it.
Okay. It was done at Olympic.
It's like, you're told things sometimes. You think, oh, really? Because it is such a long time ago. It's sometimes really hard to recall everything that we did. It's impossible, really. Yeah.
Yeah. You didn't expect to be asked about it 50 years later.
No, I didn't. I tape up McCartney, like when he came down from Scotland with Maybe I'm Amazed on the 4 tracks with John Kurlander engineering. And it was like my second week in. And I had this vague memory of doing something with Paul and Linda there, and they asked me if I wanted a cup of tea. I probably told you this, and Paul's like down in the studio and he's waving, and I couldn't hear what he was saying because I didn't know how the mixer worked, how to turn the mics up. So I opened the door and he said, "Do you want a cup of tea?" And like shouting up. And I said, "Yes, please." And then when I went down there, he gave me this tea, this proper teacup with a teapot kind of thing. And he said, "It's orange Pico." And so I thought, it was going to taste of orange juice. I thought orange Pico, that's a bit weird. It must be some fruit tea or something. And of course it was just normal tea, And it was funny because I did an interview with Mary McCartney for the Disney film, the Disney documentary, and I told her that, and she says, Dad still drinks orange pekoe tea, you know. He always drinks orange pekoe. But I always remember, and then I'd forgotten all about doing the session, and then someone contacted me, was writing the book, The McCartney Legacy, and they had the recording sheets, and they said, "Oh, John Leckie, you worked on one of the really early McCartney sessions when he first came down from Scotland." I'm like, "Did I? I don't remember." And then suddenly I remember this orange pekoe tea, and apparently I did 2 sessions with John Kurlander engineering, and I just no memory of it at all.
Would this have been Maybe I'm Amazed? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Maybe I'm Amazed. I think it was just a kind of playback. He had the 4 tracks and stuff, and I'd never really worked a 4-track before. The J37 4-track with I'd done the 8-track, which is a lot easier, but the J37 buttons, you know, the clunk, clunk, and whatever you do, you never press, when you're in rewind, never press play. You know, if you're rewinding the tape, always go to stop before you press play, you know.
Was that the Studer one?
Studer, yeah. J37, it had the little scissors, and you had the button, and the scissors came up and cut the tape kind of thing.
Yeah. But could you not go from, if you were rewinding or fast, could you not go from fast forward to rewind, slow it down, or did you have to go to stop?
Yeah. But if you were rewinding or fast forwarding and you hit play, it would just, the tape would, but you could do that on a 3M. You could do that on the 8-track. Yeah. You know, you could be winding and just go to play, and it would slow down and go into play. But the J37 never did that.
No.
The big relays, you press the button, you could hear it clunk, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Nick, were you around for the adding vocals to You Know My Name in '69?
Yes, yeah, that's one I do remember. That was a weird one because it was an old 4-track. It was on 4-track that had been done around the time of Sgt. Pepper. And Paul and John decided they wanted to do the vocals on it. So we used to store our tapes over the road, down the road.
Squash courts.
In a squash court. So I had to get the keys, go down the road, go 3 miles up in the air to this old musty squash court and find the tape. Came back with it. And by that time, Eddie Klein had found a 4-track, a Studer J37 4-track. And so just popped it on, and there was, you know, Geoff Emerick, Richard Lush writing on the box, and they wanted to record their vocals on it. They were both round one mic, and at that time I thought, wow, this is quite something, because things were already quite sort of tetchy between them. And it was a nightmare because there wasn't a lot of space just to pop the vocals in, because there were only 4 tracks, and there was a lot of stuff going on those 4 tracks. So to get the vocals where they wanted them, you have to drop in. So you play along and then suddenly have to whack it into record. And as soon as you get to the point where they stop singing and something else comes in on that track, you've got to suddenly whack it out of record. And you keep doing this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again till they're happy with their performance. So as the other 2 guys will mention, it was quite, I don't know, quite daunting and really tiring because you were living on your nerves because I didn't want to wipe anything that had been recorded all that time ago, really. You know, it's a bit of responsibility, but over to you guys. You did all that as well. That's the thing. There's no undo, you know, it's not like with computers where you just undo it. You know, if you ran over, if you drop a guitar solo in on the vocal track or something, because that was the only track left was this little gap between the second chorus and the third verse, and that was the solo, and you had to go in and do it again and again and again.
Yeah.
God, how nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Robert,
yeah.
Was that one of the later times when John and Paul actually did anything together around one mic or not? Did they do several other songs? Because you've obviously got a good depth of knowledge on what they did.
Yeah. So that was April of '69. So they'd already started at Abbey Road. And by the time they did the final round of sessions starting in July, and John was gone for the first week because he had his car accident. And then when he came in, it was with Yoko in the bed in the studio floor. They did the co-vocal on Come Together in spots. there are pictures taken in the studio where they seem to be on the same mic, but when those stems came out, I think they're on separate tracks.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Somebody like Jerry Hammack would know more than me, but what an unbelievable occasion that you must have thought as you're listening to this track, this is an odd thing. What kind of Beatles song is it?
Yeah, I thought, well, this, I'm not being rude, but I thought they were kind of sort of scratching the bottom of the barrel. It's something they hadn't used on the Pepper or Magical Mystery Tour single or whatever EP. And so I thought, it was a fun track, full of fun. And I thought, they always did have that element of fun, didn't they, the Beatles, and humour. But I thought, well, this is a pretty weird song to be doing. When we were doing other stuff on the Abbey Road album, I thought, why this? It's sort of a bit out of context, really. But there we go.
I think with that era as well, things were a lot cruder, but they did so much, didn't they? You know what I mean? They just did so much with that technology. It's just unbelievable, really. Just so much.
It was all about the performance, really, getting the right take. It's like you just went for and as many instruments as possible down at the same time. It wasn't like let's start with the drums to a click kind of thing, or it was never that, was it? It was always like.
It was also adding things on the mix. I mean, people used to stick things like tambourines on at the last minute while they were doing a mix, stick a mic out, and somebody would be adding something else. It's quite amazing because of shortage of tracks. Everything's used up, so they still want to add something else. It's curious.
Certainly more creative in a way, I think, for that instant result. And Mickey Most, I think, was a classic for that sort of thing, for tambourines and all that, using up tracks, with CCS and all that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to change the subject a little bit because you just said about Yoko in the bed. And Robert, I probably haven't told you this before because it's taken me ages to work it out and analyze. And it's about my interview for Abbey Road, how I got the job. And I went for the interview, which Ken Townsend gave me from college. And it was a few months until I got the letter saying they'd offered me a job, And I've worked it out. So this is what happened. I went for the interview and I'd written a book, a thesis, not a book, but a thesis. And I've still got it all handwritten on electronic music. And it was like a whole thing of Stockhausen and the Moog. And I did technical diagrams of oscillators and things. And I think that's how I got the job because I went to college, you see, and did a sort of film and television course, but somehow I did this thesis on electronic music. This would have been 68. Anyway, I went for my interview and Gus Cook was the manager and Ken Townsend said, I'll show you around the studio. And he walked up to number 2 and they said, I think the Beatles are recording here. And this was in the morning. He said, I think the Beatles are in here. And he opened the door and the first person I saw was George Martin, who was in shirt sleeves. He was like, they had the jacket off. I don't know who the engineer was. And Ringo. And Ringo was, this is in Studio 2 and it was around the other way. So it was a TG mixer, but it was facing, so the studio window's on the right as you're looking at the speakers kind of thing. And the desk was up on a platform. So the chairs were kind of on this platform that you stepped up on. And at the back, and then there was Ringo in there and he had this suit on. He had this black suit on like he was been to a wedding or something, which was a bit unusual. I can remember, now, and it was a bit unusual because it was hot. And Ken Townsend said, and there's the studio. And I looked out the window down there and there was this bed with Yoko on and it was all unmade. It wasn't like she was in the bed. There was all junk there and it was all her clothes and she was on the bed. And John looked up at me in the white, and he had the white suit on. And he looked up at me as much as say, who's that kind of thing. And I stepped back. And then, but this is the other thing. And then they played the music. Someone said, George Martin said, let's hear the track then. And they played Come Together. They didn't play all of it. I was kind of escorted out. Like they just heard like the beginning and then I left and Ken said, come on, we have to go kind of thing. But the thing about me is at the time, I wasn't into the Beatles. I mean, I was more into Zappa and Beefheart and crazy music and things. And so the Beatles were kind of like a teeny bopper band. They were like Yellow Submarine and Obla Di Bla Da. Me and my friends, I was embarrassed to say, and when I went back and I was living in a hippie house in Portobello Road, and I went back to my mate and said, hey man, you got to hear this new Beatles record. It's got these African drums all over it. They've obviously got these African drums, and the new Beatles album is going to be fantastic. And that was come together. Anyway, that was my memory of it. And it's only through the internet and sourcing things I think that my interview was the morning of when they did the photo on the crossing. And that's why Ringo was in the wedding suit, the black wedding suit. John was in the white suit. And that was the 8th of August. And on the 7th of August, they mixed Come Together. And so they'd done the photo session and they'd obviously say, let's play last night's mix, which was Come Together. And Yoko, the thing I don't have a diary, so I don't actually know whether it was the 8th. And then I'm putting it together and thinking, well, if Yoko had the bed after the car accident, which was in July, wasn't it? The car accident.
Yep.
So whether she still had the bed in the studio on the 8th of August, I don't know. But that's what I saw. And I can remember, going to my friend and saying, oh, the Beatles have got these African drums on their new album. It's going to be fantastic. And Yoko was in bed and John had this white suit on. And it's taken me all this time to put it into place,
Uh-huh.
That was my interview. Anyway, that was my first day there.
Wow.
And then I didn't. Bed in number 3, so it obviously moved around a fair bit.
Did it? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's before it was.
But that's what I don't know if I don't know if it was a dream. Maybe it was all a dream.
No. I think the bed moved around. Whatever studio, and the bed went with them.
Because it was really unmade. It was really untidy. It wasn't like her sitting in a hospital bed and all clean and stuff with a table.
It was just a mattress on the floor, wasn't it?
No, it was a bed they ordered from Harrods.
Was it?
Yeah. I'll send you guys the pictures if you guys haven't seen them. They didn't surface till I think 2013. There's pictures that were clearly taken from Yoko's perspective because you see John and Paul in the background, but you see the tips of her shoes.
I've seen that. And there's Mal Evans. Mal Evans is standing next. You just see the face of Mal standing there. Little snapshots.
Yeah. And there's one where Patty and Linda are sitting in the bed with her.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And this is your first introduction to EMI. So okay,
that's
what goes on here.
This is what goes on. But we used to go to, there was a restaurant called Seed, which was a macrobiotic restaurant. And it was in a basement of a big house near Paddington Station at Westbourne Grove. And it was called Seed. And it sold brown rice and vegetables, hippie food. And I always remember because it was 3 and 6 for a bowl of brown rice with tahini and soy sauce and sort of sauteed vegetables. And if you went to the curry place, it was 5 and 6 for a vegetable curry with rice. And it was, no, man, go to Seed. It's only 3 and 6. These are the things you remember,
Fantastic.
John and Yoko and everyone you'd go, hey, if you go down, I was down there the other night and John and Yoko were sitting there, So we'd go down there and see if John and Yoko were there, for that bowl of brown rice.
So you guys did some work post-Beatles with Paul, at least. Am I correct? I know you did, John. You talked about that.
Yeah, I think we probably all did, didn't we?
I only did some sessions with Wings. That was all.
That's what I mean. Yeah. You did you did Hi, right?
I did 61 takes of Hi. Yeah, and also that. And also I got a copy of that. That's how I knew I did the Maybe I'm Amazed. That McCartney Legacy, that big book that's just come out. That's fantastic. And
it is fantastic. It's
61 takes. 61 takes of Hi, and then I did the sort of medley on Red Rose Speedway and recorded. I was the balance engineer because Alan Parsons couldn't do it. He was probably doing Dark Side of the Moon, and Vera said, "John, you're in Studio 2 now next week with Wings." Vera was the woman who did all the bookings.
Okay.
So Vera Samwell kept the diary. and told you what sessions you were on.
And that was with Glyn Johns still producing?
Glyn Johns, no, not on Wings.
Yeah, he was early on involved with Red Rose until he walked out. I didn't know if your time was concurrent with his or not.
No, this was Paul, and they just come back from Wings Across Europe. They just done the bus trip, which I didn't know till I read the book that Alan Parsons had recorded and had gone out to France and recorded some of those concerts on the Stones Mobile. I didn't know that at the time at all. I don't know. I was just like put on the session and, I was shitting myself, basically. It was like, oh, fuck, it's Paul. And, they were all, what can I say? They were all drinking and smoking and and all the sessions would start at 4 or 5 in the afternoon and go until 6, 7, 8 in the morning, until they staggered out. And you come in and do another 10 takes of high till they got it right,
Given that band would fall apart the following year, did you get any sense of the dynamics between the band members at that time? I mean, Henry has told the press that he always expected Paul to walk away and get back with the Beatles at any time. And so he felt kind of insecure about Wings being a viable thing. I was just wondering if you picked up on what was going on between the band members at that time. He also, I guess, had a certain amount of disdain for Linda being in the band at all.
Henry didn't seem like that. I mean, Paul was obviously in charge. It was all Paul's show. They would look at him all the time. And Henry was drinking, smoking in the corner. Didn't really do much, really, as I can remember. It was all Paul either playing guitar or bass. And, Denny Sewell, the drummer, was great and was kind of loud. And Linda, can't remember much about Linda, really. What was going on there? Paul would, because I did that medley with Lazy Dynamite and
Hold Me Tight.
Hold Me Tight. Yeah, Feel All Right. It was terrible songs. So why are we doing this? They must have better songs than this. So
Denny Lane, any impressions of him?
He was drinking and smoking. Yeah, he was all right. He was good. He was good, but again, he was just following what Paul. I can't remember them coming up with many ideas or objecting to anything. It was very much Paul telling them what to do and things.
Right. Okay.
I have behind me an invitation to the Wings launch of their first album at Leicester Square, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, in late 71.
Yeah, that's it. You wouldn't see it 'cause it's probably too far away, but it's an original, and it's still got the raffle number on it, the raffle ticket number.
Oh,
so
wow.
I better see if I've won or not.
Well, do you remember that event particularly?
Yes, I do remember that event because.
Tell us.
Well, we went there and Paul and Linda were obviously there, and all the DJs from Radio 1, as it was then, DLT and all those were there. And I went with Gloria, if you remember, John and Nick. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn McCurry. Yeah.
And I took her, and it was just a great time there. I think Ray McVeigh and his band were the band that played there, or his orchestra. And they were like a dance band, weren't they? Sort of.
Yeah.
Easy listening stuff, wasn't it?
Like Joe Loss, kind of thing.
Yeah, but it was good. And I think Paul wore a suit that wasn't quite finished, if you know what I mean. I think it was at that occasion I saw him. It was like in a Beatles suit, if you know what I mean, with the collarless thing. I'm just going on trying to think here, but I thought I'd better keep the invitation because I was working at Manchester Square then, guys. And I had a lot of trouble with my ears at Abbey Road towards the end of my short career there because people like Mickey Most would play something at 100 watts and stand outside and listen to it and leave the engineers stuck inside the control room.
You should have done cutting for him, I tell you. He always melted loud. Yeah. But the actual event was very good. I mean, not a lot went on there. I mean, I'm not sure people like Andy Fairweather were there and people like that, It's just such a long time ago. But I remember
getting the invite and being chuffed with it.
Is this Wings Wildlife, the first album, you say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember hearing it for the first time?
Take It, Tony, it starts with, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly right.
Take It, Tony, which is Tony Clark.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
I just wonder what it would have been like seeing this Beatle now launching a whole new band. Do you have any impression at the time that you remember thinking, what kind of music is this? What are these guys doing? Any take one way or another?
Well, I never thought they'd be like the Beatles at all. You know, I think there's only one of a kind, isn't there? Beatles, in my opinion. Although they influenced a lot of people, but I don't think whatever anybody did afterwards would be like the Beatles.
No.
Yeah, it was strange because it just seemed they all sort of like split up and they were doing all their own songs all of a sudden. I think for us guys, I mean, obviously engineers, but we all accepted it. This was just the change. This is what was happening, and I think maybe a lot of Paul's songs were a bit more Beatle-y than perhaps George Harrison's, and I don't know. They're definitely going off in their own direction, and just accepted it. It was just what they were doing.
But Nick, didn't you do Cold Turkey? Didn't you do Plastic Ono Band, Cold Turkey?
Did some Plastic Ono stuff, yeah. Did a 24 hours long session of Plastic Ono.
Who engineered that then? Who engineered that? Tony Clark?
Well, I can't remember. I remember doing something else, and Geoff Emerick was producing it. So
Cold Turkey?
Live in... No, it wasn't Cold Turkey. It was live in Toronto. And Geoff Emerick was producing it, and Mike Sheedy was mixing it, and I was tape-hopping. And, that was pretty curious. But, I can't remember. I think Yoko... I do remember at some point Yoko being recorded kicking an ashtray around the studio or something
on Cold Turkey.
What's going on?
Didn't Eric Clapton play on that? Eric Clapton played on Cold Turkey,
and Ringo and Klaus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they took a couple attempts at that.
Yeah.
I think they tried one at Trident and at EMI too. And right now I don't remember which one was the keeper, but they'd done it a couple of times.
Yeah, because George used Klaus as well, didn't he? On Buy Some, Try Some. And on
uh,
All Things Must Pass and everything. Klaus was always there. Lovely man.
For most of this stuff until at least through Living in the Material World, and then I think he started using Willie Weeks around the time of Dark Horse.
Didn't while the Beatles were, I'm not sure if it was while they were mixing, let it be, McCartney was in Studio 3 doing something at his own album. Is that right? Exactly
right.
Yeah.
Yes. In late March of 70.
Yeah, that's right. And nobody knew. He used a pseudonym, didn't he? I think
Billy Martin.
Billy Martin. That's it. Yeah.
So that's what you would have seen in Vera's diary. If if Vera left the room, you could go through her diary and see what sessions were coming up. And you'd see Billy Martin. You go, who's that?
Who's Derek and the Dominoes?
Derek and the Dominoes, yeah.
It was Eric Clapton, but it was Derek and the Dominoes, and the people think, that's odd. I haven't heard of them before.
That's how I got to do Mott the Hoople, because I looked in Vera's diary and there was like 2 weeks of Mott the Hoople, and I thought, I'll do that, because no one else had heard and no one knew who Mott the Hoople were, and I had all the albums,
Oh, wow. So any final thoughts on your experiences such as they were with Beatles, and here we are 50 plus years on, still talking about them and analyzing on a granular level everything they had anything to do with? Do you look back and think how lucky I was to have had the career I did and have access to so many giant artists? Does it just seem weird to you, or just it was work? It was your normal life?
It doesn't matter who you work with. You give them equal attention, and whether they're Beatles or just some unsigned band. Really, I mean, when you're doing the job, it's like you do what I do, and it's work, and you do your best, really. And the fact that there might be Beatles or some punk rock band, you still try and do your best job on it. So I think you learn quite quickly to not be put off by the fame, really. I guess, don't get too nervous about it or treat them like normal people, and hopefully they treat you like a normal person. They don't always, of course.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's going to make the artist a lot easier if you're easy. But if you're like sort of fussing around or just staring at them
or asking them for their autograph, you never ever do that.
Oh, we never did that. We never ever. One of the big no-nos.
Don't get in their way, no.
In fact, I got pulled over the coals because I was doing some Plastic Ono stuff, and John wanted a 7.5 copy of something or other. And back in those days, we used to have to make whoever it was, the A&R man or the artist, they used to have to sign to take it away, right? And so I said to John, can you sign for the 7.5 copy, please? And he said, yeah. And he signed the recording sheet. And the day after, I turned up at work and I got pulled over the coals by Francis Dillnut. Because you don't ask John Lennon to sign for it. I said, well, I didn't know, he was quite happy. No, you don't do that. And obviously John hadn't complained about it, but they just saw this signature on the sheet and thought, we don't ask the Beatles to sign things. So that was pretty weird. Yeah, just doing your job, isn't it? That's how it was.
I think there's one saving grace. We didn't have mobile phones then, otherwise no work would have been done. Everyone would have been taking selfies.
That's why there's no photographs, because you never have a camera. No one had a you never dream of taking a camera to work, and you only took your camera on holiday. You never took it to work.
I don't know. I've got one picture of me at Abbey Road at all.
I don't. No, me too.
Wow. We have, John. There's one of you, me and your wife, in number 3.
In the fancy dress party.
I'm in drag.
There is those pictures when Gus Cook retired. Brian Gibson was the photographer, and he took pictures of everyone, like in the studio. Would have been 1972. But we weren't working. I mean, we were just standing there, really. Yeah. So, there's very few photographs. And as you say, if it was phones now, everyone would be taking if you were working with the Beatles with your phone, you'd be sitting there with it on your, like snapping away, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Any final thoughts?
I can't wait for the new Beatles record to come out.
Oh yeah. Tell me what you guys think about that.
I wish they hadn't declared it was AI. It was done by, they shouldn't have said that, because it's
giving everybody the wrong idea.
All those re-releases, what they call, the other 2 tracks that came out with Anthology.
Real Love and Free as a Bird.
Yeah, they were rubbish, really. And I don't know why he didn't. Which one is it that's like? It's like walking in the sand. Shangri-La.
Oh, remember when?
When? Whatever happened to the girl that I once knew? It's exactly. Even the lyric is whatever happened to. It's the same as Shangri-La's, isn't it?
Yeah.
And didn't they do one called Free as a Bird?
Free as a Bird,
yeah.
So not fans of that stuff?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
If they're happy to put it out, to me that's okay, and the public probably enjoyed it because it was a successful record, wasn't it?
It wasn't them playing.
So things are starting to really, they really have used everything up now, haven't they? I don't think there's anything left at all. All the outtakes go on compilations now and box sets. So there's very little, or if anything, left to use, which is why they're having to do AI things, I suppose. And that is a shame, really.
Mm.
Well, the one thing that's on my bucket list for them to work on is the Star Club tapes. If they can make that sound a bit more listenable, and it is the Beatles at their most rockin', that would be phenomenal.
Mm.
I don't know that.
And make it sound less like a band playing next door.
Mm.
When was that recorded, Robert?
It was recorded in Hamburg in December of '62. So it's the last documentation of them as a club act before Brian started putting them in theaters. And if you've ever heard it, it's ferocious. They're obviously on speed, and they're just blasted through Chuck Berry and all this amazing stuff. And it's like, without anybody really paying attention to them, just getting this last blast of energy out of their systems. And it's just amazing. Love Me Do had been released, and Please Please Me had been recorded, but not the album yet. So they're chomping at the bit to get back to England.
Wow, didn't even know about that. So yeah, you live and learn.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Well, that'll
cool
be the
stuff.
next thing out there, won't it? Yeah, they can do some magic with that, I suppose. Which I think they
Yeah.
can now. They just draw every element out and work on it, don't they? And then reassemble it. It's amazing, really. But I suppose
That
if you
would be
can make
worthwhile.
it sound better, that's got to be good.
Absolutely. Something About the Beatles. Created and hosted by Robert Rodriguez. Executive producer Rick Way. Title song by the Corgis.